show you. It's not all sun over here. It's actually raining.
I've had to turn up the windscreen wipers to higher setting. It's quite distressing.
So he says.
I haven't got any clothes for this kind of weather, I'm afraid.
Oh, look. Oh, Dicks, they're all on the windscreen.
Large gyroscope. And if you've ever taken a gyroscope and tried to turn it against its axis, it won't let you do it. Well, they had the same problem with this. And in World War II, most pilots flying rotary engines were unable to make right-hand turns. Not unless they wanted to take a long way to do it. Because if you tried to force this thing into a right-hand turn, the airplane would snap, roll, and dive. Which was not a bad thing. It was sometimes very advantageous to have that ability to snap, roll, and get out of the harm's way in a hurry. So that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. In addition to that, it had another little problem, and that was the fact that since the whole thing is spinning, there's no way to have a carburetor on this. And if you don't have a carburetor, you don't have a throttle control. And in fact, once this thing is started up, it immediately goes to its full rated horsepower and RPM within a very, very short period of time. There was nothing in between. It only had two states, off and wide open. Now you can imagine that can be a little problem, particularly on the ground. They tried a lot of different things. There was an awful lot of engineering went into things, trying to find a way to make it run slow. They were never very successful. They never worked very well. And the only thing that was consistent in them was what was called a flip switch. And the pilot had that mounted on his control column, and he could press that switch with his thumb. That would short out the ignition system of this engine, and this thing would stop producing power and start to coast down. And just before it stopped, he'd release it, get another burst of power, and keep doing it. The technique was known as blipping, and that allowed them to taxi on the ground with bursts of power. Imagine driving your car down I-4 with your foot to the floor and controlling your speed by turning the key on and off. Same proposition. In addition to that, it had another little problem, and that was the fact, again, because of its design, it had to have a sacrificial oil system. Now, normally oil in any engine is either stored in a pan underneath it or in a tank adjacent to it, and that same oil is recycled through the engine all the time. They couldn't do that with this one. No way to recycle oil in it. And the oil and the fuel went into this hollow crankshaft in the back of it, and since they went in together at the same time, it was necessary to use a type of oil that would not mix with gasoline. There's only one known oil that will do that. That's castor oil. And since it was a sacrificial oil system, the oil would travel in here by centrifugal force and be forced into the cylinders, and it would eventually come ripping out the exhaust valve. Where's the pilot? Guess what he's putting up with? A lot of castor oil. I can see some of the faces here may remember castor oil, not very fondly, I certainly don't. Would have been given to you on certain occasions, known to have an extreme purgative effect. Well, it did on them too. Make no mistake about it, it was a big problem in the First World War. I can tell you this, that when those guys, after about a 3-hour mission, when they had their home field in sight, they generally had only one idea in their heads. And it wasn't victory roads. Guaranteed. I think that's where the term dashing aviator actually came from. As you can imagine. Now, if you've seen any World War I films, you might have noticed that other than the flying sequences, everything else takes place in a bar, doesn't it? Well, that's historically accurate. Because there was a belief in World War I that consuming large amounts of alcohol would help ward off the effects of the castor oil. In fact, the RAF actually proposed for their pilots a mixture of half milk and half brandy to help with the problem. Flying in the First World War was not a whole lot of fun. Now, I told you that this thing was originally developed for a motorcycle, and it was probably the craziest thing I ever saw. Now, you don't understand how this engine works. There's no throttle control. It runs wide open. Well, this idiot in France, excuse me, this adventurer in France, actually built a wheel around this thing with a tire on it and mounted it to a bicycle frame. And then they put that thing up on a little stand and they cranked this thing up, and as soon as they got it up to full speed, his assistant would kick him off the stand. Actual fact, I'm not making this up. And they set a number of records. It doesn't say whether or not the driver survived, but they did set some records. I've actually seen pictures of this. And you can't even see the motorcycle. All you can see is a big cloud of smoke. Crazy. There's lots more things in here I could cover, but we do have a time limit, so.
Oh, what? Look at this. Wow. Oh, what?
Grab a bunch. Keep yourself comfortable. Take yourself off.
Time of day because it's wet out there.
Yeah.
It's just too.
I think there's more rain coming to us. It looks like it's clearing in the morning.
Yeah, it just makes the grass too stiff.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the wood shop here at Fantasy of Flight. My name is Ken Kellett. I work for the aircraft department here. There are 6 of us who actually work on the airplanes, and we split more or less evenly between the mechanics that keep the airplanes working and 3 of us who work over on this side doing restoration. Now, those 3 guys, I'm the only one that does woodwork and fabric work, so really all the early airplanes sort of fall to me to deal with. So all of us have our own individual projects that we're working on. I've got some projects here that I'm just reviewing and looking at right now, some World War I software pops. But what we'll try to tell you here is a little bit about what we do, what we're trying to accomplish. All of our projects, as I said, are all individual. Those of us, we all have projects that we're working on. That doesn't mean that we don't rely on each other, because we do, to help when we need some help. But for the most part, our projects are our own, and they're kind of ours from start to finish. So there's a lot to know, a lot to sort out to get these things put together. Now, I do sort of 3 different things here. I do restoration, where we take a real airplane, run it kind of back there, and the wings to it here. That's an original World War I airplane. It was found in a barn or wherever, and believe it or not, they're still found, and we still find stuff once in a while. And as you can tell, that's in pretty bad shape. Airplanes that we build here, we don't build any static airplanes. Everything is to be flown, and so it has to be airworthy. And so the wood in that, as you can see, is all dry rotted. The blues are all long departed, and they're kind of falling apart. So nobody's going to fly in anything that looks like that. Wings will look like this when they're rebuilt. These are new wings. We'll go through here and we'll use all the original pieces that we can. Anything that is airworthy we will use, but for the most part it'll get replaced. Now, restoration is something where we'll totally tear that airplane apart and kind of rebuild it really from the ground up, so that it's a brand new airframe when we're done. The second thing I do here is repair airplanes. A lot of the airplanes we have got damaged when our owner had all these airplanes down in Miami, and Hurricane Andrew came ashore. It knocked the building down, and all the building fell on top of the airplanes. And we'll just let your imagination run wild as to what a wooden airplane looks like after a beam like that falls on top of it. So a lot of busted airplanes. I've been working for him now for 18 years. I came on board right after the hurricane, and we haven't scratched the surface of fixing the busted airplanes. So long process, but we can go in on some things. If you've got a wing that's got a damaged rib or something in it, we can repair that. We don't have to build a whole brand new wing just because it's got a broken rib. So there are things that we can legally do that are safe and whatnot. The third thing I do is build brand new airplanes from scratch, reproductions. That's what these airplanes are. These 2 solid pups are reproductions. Why do we have reproductions? Well, the boss is a collector of real airplanes, obviously, but the reality is we're also about aviation history here. He wants to experience that and share that. In some cases, airplanes just don't exist today. The Fokker triplane that's in the north hangar, there is no real Fokker triplane that survives today. The Spirit of St. Louis, Lindbergh's airplane, that flew from New York to Paris. The one we have in the north hangar is a replica. That's the real ones in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. The racers, all those race planes we have, those planes either crashed in their careers and were destroyed, or the few that survived are actually in museums. So there again, those airplanes are priceless in their own way, and so those airplanes are unobtainable except through reproductions, building replica. Right now, I'm building this airplane, or just getting started on it. Haven't really done too much on it just yet. This is a 1913 Benoit. I know it says Benoist on there, but it's pronounced Benoit. This was built in St. Louis in 1913. This airplane was utilized in the creation of the world's first airline that was created over here at St. Petersburg. In 1914, this airplane carried 1,205 passengers, one at a time, across Tampa Bay. The 100th anniversary is coming up here in a few years. The Florida Aviation Historical Society guys over there in St. Pete got Kermit's ear and convinced him he should build a replica and do that flight. And so that's where we're at. There's no drawings to this. That's a problem. We went up to Washington, D.C. We spent some time at the library at the Air and Space Museum. We know a lot about it. We found a lot of data, a lot of photographs, but no drawings. So we're going to recreate the airplane as best we can. We're going to spend $400,000 or $500,000 to accomplish this, and we hope it works. I guess. I built this beautiful table over here that also goes along with being this super duper woodworker that I'm supposed to be. Because you got to have a perfect work table to work from to be able to build a decent airplane. And so that's critical. So the fuselage is 23 feet long. I have a 24-foot table, so it should fit. We'll be building them on that table. This airplane is somewhat unique. It's a flying boat. It is my 45th airplane that I have worked on. The engine sits down here inside the hull, and it drives the propeller shaft with a chain, just like the Wright Brothers airplane, chain drive system. I have built this three-dimensional mock-up of the center section of this airplane so that the machinist next door can get started on building the drive system, all the sprockets and bearings and all the stuff that's going to make this thing work. I've devised this as the best solution to that problem. The engine, of course, will sit down here on these two bearers. This is the fuel tank. This is the radiator, because it's a water-cooled engine. And the rest of this is merely the dimensional mock-up of where everything is supposed to be so that he can, in fact, sort that out and build his system. I just do woodwork. Thank God I don't have to get involved with that part of it. The engine to this airplane is a 6-cylinder aluminum block 2-cycle engine. It's a Roberts engine. It's a Marine built purpose engine built back then. There's only 6 of those that we know of that exist today, and of course Kermit wants to utilize that engine for the flight. And so what we've done is there's only 6 that we know of out there. We borrowed one from a museum, and we're going to have that duplicated. I always like to stop here and tell my visitors that if you just happen to have a Roberts 6-cylinder in your garage,
You're wealthy.
stay after the tour, because I'd like to talk to you. And I like to always tell the women that if husband had a 6-cylinder Bronx engine in the garage, you could be sitting back right now, and instead of listening to this talk, you could be thinking about maybe that Cadillac Escalade or that Corvette or whatever that you would like to drive home in, what color that might be, how cool you'd look. So you'd just be thinking about that if you just happen to have one of those engines, because we would probably be willing to accommodate you. The reason for that, the engine that we're having rebuilt was made from new from scratch. So far, we got the first built. The guy who's making the wooden patterns so that they can cast the block and the cylinders, that work's only cost $80,000. We don't have an engine yet, but we've spent $80,000. This engine's gonna run 150, 200,000. I don't know. We don't have any idea until we end up with it, and I hope it works.